Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi mining community, welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast, and we have a returning guest who has appeared on twice before. Last appeared on the show back in July 2023, which was episode 360. Scott Williamson, who's the managing director of Blackstone Minerals, who are a listed mining company who are developing a high-grade undeveloped copper-gold porphyry project in the world, who's uniquely positioned to capitalise on an untapped potential of the Mankayan Copper and Gold Project in the Philippines. Scott is a mine engineer by background, working in both operations and in corporate roles during his career, and has an exposure to capital, corporate finance and capital markets and investor relations during his career. He's been at the helm of Blackstone for nearly 8 years now, and he's going to give us an update since he was last on, discuss the Mankayan project, talk about gold and copper porphyry and what the Philippines is like as a mining jurisdiction, and a lot more. Scott, welcome back to the podcast. How you doing?
Yeah, great. Yeah, good. Thanks, Rob. And thanks for the opportunity to update the listeners.
Yeah, no worries. I just wondered if you can just, for those that didn't listen to the previous episode, I just wondered if you can give our audience, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your career, how your career sort of developed to where you obviously got today working for Blackstone.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, so I started as a mining engineer in the goldfields of Western Australia. I started at the School of Mines out in Kalgoorlie, and particularly focused in those early years on underground mining. So I worked in a number of different underground mines across Australia and multiple different mining methods as well. And that's also interesting for this project. But I actually started as a graduate for Rio Tinto in a block caving mine up at Argyle Diamonds. So that's a large scale type of mining method that is typical for large ore bodies and also typical for porphyries. So during that time, I also then worked at North Parks, which is another large block caving operation. So yeah, moved around Australia, worked in a number of different gold mines, copper mines, multiple different mining methods. And then eventually moved back to Perth about 10 years ago and worked in an African producer called Perseus, and they've been very successful in recent years. And so West Africa focused for a couple of years there. And then I stepped into the capital markets as a mining analyst for a company called Hartley's. They've recently merged with Euros to the company now is Euros Hartley's. And that role, I basically learnt how to analyse mining projects, but also mining equities. And so my role there was to sell to institutional investors and really find capital for junior mining companies. And that was a really good stepping stone into this role. Before I jumped into this role, I also did some time with Resolute, so I was back in West Africa but that was in an investor relations role, which is very similar to what I was doing at Hartley's. So the role there is in investor relations is very similar to the mining, selling mining equities, but you only get one mining stock to sell. And that's very similar to what I do now. I sell one stock, and it's Blackstone, and I've been doing that for 8 years. And so this role, it's very much driven on investor relations. But then also, when we moved into Vietnam recently, we had to build a team, build a culture, and really build a company. So that's been a great experience to use some of that skill set around mining project management and team building, which I learnt in my early stages of my career, but also being able to then access the capital. So as you know, junior mining companies, it's all about the ability to raise money and source capital from the market and use that to then add value for shareholders. And it has been a bit of a wild ride. We've added value and then we've lost value, and some of that's been unfortunately out of our hands. So what happened with nickel was a difficult time for nickel mining companies, and so it's been a tough couple of years. But yeah, we're starting to turn the corner now with the focus on this new asset, and really excited to go again and add value again. And yeah, we think this one could be the one that really takes Blackstone to the next level.
Yeah. Obviously, Blackstone has had a lot of success from the acquisition and expansion and development of Ta Khoa in Vietnam, which you obviously just briefly touched on. I just wonder if you can summarise through how you actually navigated the process from start to where it ended up, where Blackstone learned from that experience. And how does that position the company to progress the Mankayan project, and what your personal drive is behind this?
Yeah, so about 6 years ago, we moved into Vietnam, and that asset, it's a nickel sulfide project, and it was previously operated between 2013 and 2016. And when we moved in, it was in care and maintenance. What we did though is we focused our exploration on a different ore body. So the previous owners had depleted one of the ore bodies, and then we went and defined a new ore body, which was right next door to the existing mine. And so we took on an existing mine, but it was more of an exploration opportunity. So we actually drilled 100,000 meters, and then from that we defined a maiden resource for this new ore body, which was the large disseminated ore body next door to the mine where they mined a high grade massive sulfide. So defined a large resource, and then we took that resource through the study phases. So we went from the scoping study to a pre-feasibility study, and then ultimately we went all the way through, and we've also got a bankable feasibility study as well. So and that process took about 3 to 4 years. So it's about a 3 to 4 year process to go from an exploration opportunity all the way through to a bankable feasibility study. And through that, we learned how to operate in Southeast Asia, and there is some nuances around operating in Southeast Asia. Similar to when you go into Africa, there are definitely similarities between operating in different countries in Africa. Each country is slightly different, so you can't sort of put them all into one basket, but there's definitely similarities, and a lot of the experience that we have in Vietnam can now be taken to the Philippines. And the other thing is some of our team, our Vietnamese team, so we've built a really strong technical team of scientists and engineers. So all of the different engineering disciplines, we've got a number of different geologists, metallurgists, and all of the different engineering disciplines. And some of those have already started and helping us on the Mankayan project, but also a lot of the equipment that we use as well. So when we went into Vietnam, we actually bought a lot of our equipment to get our operating costs down. Things like geophysics and drill rigs. We've built our own metallurgical testing laboratory. So a lot of that equipment can now be used on the Mankayan project in the Philippines. So we're bringing a lot of that across. The metallurgical testing laboratory will stay in Vietnam, but we can send samples into Vietnam and use that laboratory for testing copper. So it's a fairly similar process to float copper as it is for nickel. So there's a lot of similarities and a lot of synergies with our time operating in Vietnam, but we can now use in the Philippines.
I wonder if you can just give us a summary of obviously the current market in copper and gold, and what these, and I suppose how the grade and depths mined today have changed over the past, say, 20 years why demand has continued to increase with the EV story, electrification. So yeah, just wondering if you can just give us a summary of copper and gold.
Yeah, so copper, as we sit today, is probably the tightest copper concentrate market the world has ever seen. I think we just hit an all-time high for copper pricing, and that's really driven by the demand that's coming associated with electrification, and so we see a lot of demand coming. Unfortunately, the supply is quite limited, and the supply is really focused on like a lot of the majors are trying to get in and increase supply, but it is very capital intensive, and it takes a long time to bring copper mines online. And so there's this, ultimately very similar to what's happened in gold. You've got lower and lower grades are being mined, and so it's really becoming all about bulk mining, and both open pit but ultimately underground bulk mining. So, and this is where this block caving mining method comes into play. So when I started at Rio Tinto about 20 years ago or so, the future of copper mining was block caving, and so they, as a graduate mining engineer, they were trying to build as many block caving mining engineers as they could, because that was to be the future of copper, and it still is today. And I think ultimately all of the open pits that will be depleted, and then they'll move into these block caving operations. And what's interesting with block caving is it's a mining method where you can get the operating costs down so low that it, depending on your strip ratio of your open pit, you can actually mine underground at an operating cost potentially lower than an open pit. So it basically is like a rock factory. There's a lot of capital up front, but then once you've sunk the capital, it's one of the lowest operating costs mining methods globally. So the future is block caving, and that's the only way we're going to be able to bring on the supply that is required to meet all of this demand that's coming through electrification. So yeah, that's the demand is driving this increase in tightness in the copper concentrate market. And then what we also believe is that it's the assets with the high gold grades that are going to attract major mining companies as well. So what we've seen is that the strategic assets globally are the ones with the high gold grades, because the gold credit pays for all of your operating costs as well. And so your return on investment is so much stronger if you've got a high gold grade, because all of these porphyries tend to have a fairly similar copper grade, around 0.3% copper, for example, 0.3 to 0.5. But then not many of them have a high gold grade. So a lot of them have very low gold grades of maybe 0.1. But a lot, the ones that are attracting major mining companies are the ones with high gold grades in the similar numbers to the copper. So for example, ours has a 1-to-1 copper to gold ratio. So when we have 0.5 copper, we're also seeing 0.5 grams per ton gold. And that's the type of porphyry that's going to attract a major mining company. And so we're really excited about that. And ultimately it's that bulk underground or open pit mining that's really, because what it does is you sink your capital up front, and then it's consistent production for multiple decades. So it's as close as you're going to get to like a rock factory, or almost like an annuity in some ways, because major mining companies just want consistent production for decades. They've got the balance sheet to put in early, and up front they're happy to do the upfront capital, but knowing that it's going to be a consistent production profile for multiple decades. So they're the types of ore bodies that are going to feed the demand that's coming from electrification.
With the IDM merger, I just wonder if you can summarise how the opportunity came about to Blackstone, and obviously the previous ownership, and how the merger came to fruition. And I suppose following on, what are the key points that shareholders and potential investors should understand about the lead up to the transaction and where that ownership sits today post the merger.
No worries. So the opportunity was actually brought to us by an advisory firm in Perth called Discovery Capital, and they're a group that are very, very good at the early stage mining companies, and they do a lot of IPOs and early stage investment. And so they brought this to us late last year. The IPO market has been difficult, and so they did consider this for an IPO, but because the IPO market wasn't as strong last year, then they started looking at other opportunities. And the beauty of what we're able to do is we're able to bring this to market without a capital raising required. And so through the merger, the IDM International, which is the unlisted vehicle, they were able to keep the same valuation that they had in their last seed round, which meant that they could come to market without a down round, which is without a reduction in their valuation. So they could come to market at a strong valuation, and they could match it with ours. So there was a merger of equals. So our market cap fell to about the same level as their valuation, which was in their last seed round. And the beauty of that is we could come together and not have to raise money, because we had a little bit of cash left over just to get us through the scheme period. And then we were able to put it in the market, and it re-rated very quickly. So we were really excited when the market response was so strong. And then what we did is there's some small capital raisings, but very small capital raisings, just to get us through the merger period and the scheme of arrangement, which takes up to 4 months. And once we achieved that completion of the merger, that was then the time to go to market. And then so we're able to raise money at a much higher market cap, and as opposed to if it was an IPO, they would have had to do it at a much lower market cap. They would have only been able to raise a small amount of money. Because we were able to bring the two companies together, re-rate the company off a strong asset base, and then we could then go to market. And so we just raised $22.6 million, which has only been able to be done because we were able to get that re-rate and then raise money. So interestingly, the market knew we needed to raise money, but it kept re-rating, and that's a sign of how strong this asset is. And so we're pretty excited about, now that we've removed the need to raise, because that can slow things down with respect to the re-rate. We think that now we've achieved that capital raising, it should start to go again.
As you've obviously mentioned, that Mankayan is one of the largest undeveloped copper-gold porphyry in the world. I wonder if you can just explain the significance of such a mineralized porphyry ore body, how it's obviously formed, and why it is attractive to develop. Is there what kind of attributes that make it attractive to operate, and perhaps some similar examples for investors to compare against around the world?
Yeah, no worries. So this particular ore body has already got 10 million ounces of gold, and then another 10 million ounces of gold equivalent in the copper. So it's about a 50-50 ratio between gold and copper. And so if you want to look at it from a gold equivalent, it's actually 20 million ounces of gold equivalent. And that's without even completing the drill out phase. It's completely wide open in all directions. So it's already a world-class scale. It's over 800 million tons. So the reason why these assets are so strategic, because you've got a significant amount of metal in one chunk, and then you can use these different mining methods like block caving, open pit mining, and you can mine these things for multiple decades. So this is an asset that could easily be mined for up to 40 or 50 years. So the beauty of that is you're going to get multiple cycles. And that's what major mining companies want. They want to be able to ride a cycle all through the cycles and multiple decades, because as we know, there's highs and lows of mining, and the short mine life opportunities are, unfortunately, are risky because you might miss the cycle. So, yeah, so these assets, I'm not sure, like I won't go too much into the geology, but they are a particular type of asset that makes for a very large scale, which drops your operating costs right down. But more importantly, they give you that extended mine life. And so, yeah, this can already, as it is, we can see 40 years of mining. And it might even do 100 years. Like, as it continues to be drilled and understood, there's no reason why this asset couldn't just keep expanding significantly with further drilling. So, yeah, it is a particular type of geology that makes for very large ore bodies. But also, like I said, it's that gold grade that really drives the interest that we think we will continue to see for this asset, because the gold pays for the copper mining, or the copper pays for the gold. Like you're almost getting a negative cash cost, or a very low cash cost scenario, because of that strong byproduct credit from the gold or the copper, depending on whether you want to call it a gold mine or a copper mine. And it's just as much a gold mine as it is a copper mine. And that's why we like to use the gold equivalent, because people understand 20 million ounces of gold, that's a big number. And particularly for a junior mining company, most juniors are happy to have 1 million ounces. We've got 20.
The Mankayan setting is obviously regional geology structure, where the deposit sits in the geography and lithography, and what that means for development plan and operation. I would just wonder if you can explain to the listeners where the Mankayan is located and why it's attractive as a project, obviously with geological structure that supports the ore body, and what their expectations for replication or expansion of the deposit and resource, and if you want to cover the metallurgy as well.
Yeah, so it's on a structure that hosts another world-class ore body next door. So next door we have the Lepanto gold mine, which is an active gold mine which has been mined for over 100 years. But they also have a second world-class porphyry called the Far Southeast Porphyry, and we're only 2.5 kilometres apart. So ultimately these two assets most likely would come together in one mining operation. They would share underground infrastructure, things like crushers and conveyors, and then they would ultimately go to one processing facility. And so that ore body next door, that's had a lot of interest from major mining companies, including Robert Friedland, Rio Tinto, and then ultimately Goldfields. Goldfields invested, they bought for $230 million, they bought 40% of that asset, and they ultimately invested over $500 million, and then walked away and gave it back to the Lepanto Mining Company. So the Lepanto is a local Philippines listed mining company, currently mining gold only, but they also have this second world-class porphyry. So we can see two world-class porphyries side by side, one on our side of the fence, one on the other side of the fence. We'll be continuing to talk to Lepanto. The IDM team have already started those conversations around, well, how do we work together? Because ultimately these two assets should be together, and they should be mined by someone much bigger than Lepanto or Blackstone. So what we're thinking is, okay, well, how do we collaborate? How do we work together on all things mining, metallurgy, geology, community relations as well? So the IDM team have done an amazing job on community relations. So we'd like to support Lepanto as well on their efforts with respect to that. And metallurgy is a good point. So if we do bring these two ore bodies to one concentrator or one processing facility, can they go through the same process? And most likely they will. They're sulfide, they float well. So Mankayan's getting 94% recovery on copper, 76% on gold. So most likely, yeah, that these two assets could go through the same processing facility and have the same flow sheet and the same metallurgy. But they're all the conversations we'd like to have is okay, well, how do we work together? So yeah, I think ultimately, like I said, these assets are too big for Blackstone or Lepanto. So why not? bring them together, and the more we collaborate, the more likely we're going to attract those bigger major mining companies back into the region.
There's been 50,000 meters of drilling on the project, and obviously it's understood that it's opened up a lot of opportunity. I just wonder if you can convert some of that data to increase the resource or target higher grade. What is the history of the project in terms of knowledge that has been built, and obviously all the data that's been collected, and where you can potentially unlock further value?
Yeah, so it's actually so it was discovered in 1970, and at the time the geologist was testing a blind concept, and he found the porphyry. But there hasn't been any systematic exploration that you would expect for a discovery. So a typical discovery phase, you would start with things like soil anomalies and soil geophysics, and you would layer up all the data, and then you would put the drill hole down. What he did is he just put the drill hole down without any data, and he found it. And then so what's happened is we've had 5 junior mining companies, and each junior's just come in and drilled next to the last junior, and no one's actually stepped back and done a systematic exploration phase or a discovery phase. So we want to rediscover it, and we want to layer up all that data. We want to use things like geophysics and soils and really understand the geology, because he might have not have found the best part of it. And so we've already got a world-class ore body, but right next to it, there might be another one on our tenement package that hasn't been discovered yet. So we want to continue to do that rediscovery phase and exploration techniques that just haven't been done, because unfortunately the previous owners have just been so focused on continuing to drill out the world-class porphyry. They haven't stepped back and gone, well, what else is out there? There might be another world-class porphyry within a few hundred meters, but we just don't know because we don't have the data yet.
Obviously, the recent capital raising boosts the bank's balance of the company, and obviously allows you a decent plan to do a lot of exploration. What will that look like, and what is, I suppose, the objective of the exploration program for the remainder of this year going into 2026?
Yeah, so we want to drill around 50,000 meters. So the amount that those 5 juniors have drilled over 50 years, we want to drill that again in the next 12 to 18 months. So we want to do a lot of drilling, but we also want to do that systematic exploration. So geophysics, we've got things like magnetics, induced polarization, electromagnetics. So we want to layer up all those data sets. Soils, so we want to go and test the soil anomalies. Rock chips, so we've just today announced some rock chips that we didn't even know about. They've only just come out of the data. We want to go and confirm that and really map the structures and do that good geological science. So it's a big year of geology. In the background, we want to continue doing the metallurgical testing, the geotechnical as well, understanding the cavability of the ore body, all of those things that will de-risk it for someone to come along and mine it.
Obviously, the project can be a very large operation at its development stage. What's the ideal scenario for the development moving forward, and who is, I suppose, likely to operate such a vast mine?
So the good thing though here is we do have a high grade core, and what could be done here as a junior mining company, we could actually just focus on the high grade, which would allow us to do a lower capital scenario. So we could go in and do a smaller mining operation at circa 2 million tonne per annum, which is very similar to the Didipio copper-gold mine, which is owned by Oceana Gold, and we could start that fairly cheaply. And so that's a more of a scale that you could handle as a junior mining company. So you could then start as a small scale and then use the cash flow to then build the larger scale block cave later, or ultimately someone comes along earlier. I think it really depends on the dynamic in the market and how strategic these assets are becoming, and it feels like the more likely scenario is that we won't won't have to mine anything here. It'll be someone much bigger, and they'll just go straight for the big capex block cave. But if that doesn't happen, we can very easily go and mine long hole open stoping, which is a mining method that I've done numerous times throughout Australia, and it's a typical mining method that's used all around the world. So as a junior, we could go and build that fairly cheaply and be in cash flow, and then you're away. So yeah, there's multiple different ways that we could mine this. It's going to be interesting to see which way it goes.
And obviously the project's focus for the Philippine mining industry, which is a mature market and obviously sophisticated, and it's important for the national economy. Can you outline the steps taken in the past and today with Blackstone to obviously continue the goodwill and develop the project over time, and I suppose with the obviously local authorities and communities, how do they see the project and the future of it?
Yeah, so the good thing is that we're not just inheriting a world-class ore body, we're inheriting all of that great work that the previous owners have done. So this is an asset that has been through a number of junior mining companies, and they've all done an amazing job with community relations. So they've got a really strong team as well. So we're bringing the team across from IDM. Some of those team members have been with this asset for over 20 years. And so through that 20-year period, they've built really strong relationships with the community. And so then this is a community that's been mining in this region for over 100 years. So these people are either miners or friends and family of miners. So they understand how important mining is to the livelihoods of the people and the economic benefits that mining brings. The IDM team have achieved two very key milestones. They extended the mining license for another 25 years. They did that in 2022. And then just in December 2024, they signed an agreement, a binding agreement with the local Indigenous, and the Indigenous people have given full consent to mine. And then through that process, they also get a 1% royalty. So the Indigenous are now incentivized, because once the mine gets up and running, that 1% royalty over a 40-year period, that's going to create intergenerational wealth for those Indigenous people and their communities. So they're now working with us because that 1% royalty is worth nothing if the ore stays in the ground. So that's really exciting because they're on board and they're excited. There's a number of next steps that we need to look at, things like environmental impact. So we need to continue the study work on the flora and the fauna, the baseline studies. Also compensate farmers. So there's a number of small scale vegetable farmers that we'd need to compensate. So there's a few more administrative roles that we need to continue to progress. But the two key milestones being the mining license, which is it's called a Mineral Production Sharing Agreement, MPSA. That's already in place, and then the agreement with the Indigenous, which is they're the two key licenses that you require to operate in the Philippines, and they've already been achieved. So that really gave us the confidence to do this deal. I think without that social license, it would have been difficult for us to take the plunge, but we're really confident that great work has set us up for the next step, which is to move this into production.
And what's with the ongoing permitting process from here?
Yeah, so like I said, it's really just administrative. It's continuing to do the study work. So you need to submit studies to the government. And so once we've completed studies, we will then submit, and then that would be approved. And with that study comes an environmental impact assessment. So that's a key milestone still to be, and we're currently doing the environmental flora and fauna studies and doing testing the baseline data. So then that would be part of the submission, and then compensation as well. So farmers would be compensated. And so once we start to progress these things, that's when we think that then we'll start to attract major mining companies back into the region.
And lastly, what's the sort of short to medium term outlook? If you're looking over the next 6 to 12 months, what are some of the milestones and plan of action? that you're looking to achieve?
Yeah, so a lot of the news flow will be focused on exploration, drilling. So there'll be consistent news flow with respect to drilling. We want to hit the ground running with some drill rigs in the next few weeks, extending the ore body, but also finding new ore bodies. So finding high-grade ore bodies, epithermal veins. There's a number of different mineralization types. So there's really excitement around discovery of new ore bodies, rediscovering the porphyry. So it's really about exploration, excitement, and that first phase of the Lassonde curve, we're really going to give that another good crack, because I think this is completely underexplored. And so it'll be real excitement around discovery of new ore bodies, rediscovering the porphyry, consistent news flow around exploration success.
Scott, thank you for your time. Appreciate you giving us an overview of Blackstone Minerals and obviously the Mankayan project that you've just explained, which seems a vast asset. And obviously, good luck with the drilling. And hopefully, you can come onto the show next year and give us an update.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Rob, and thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. Also, if our audience wants to reach out to you, if they want to follow the story, follow you on social media, what platform channels are you on?
Yeah, so we've got on the website, we've got an Investor Hub, so you can log in and put questions into the Investor Hub, which is on our website, so blackstoneminerals.com.au. We're fairly active on LinkedIn, so we've got a strong presence on LinkedIn. I do a little bit on Twitter or X. So yeah, there's probably our three channels: website, X, and LinkedIn.
Great. We include those in the show notes accompanying this podcast for easy access. So good luck for the rest of the year, and hopefully you can give us an update in 2026.
Great. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed that episode. As always, appreciate your continued support. And as Scott has just been explaining, a vast resource, gold, copper, porphyry, and a project that we should keep an eye on over the coming years. So appreciate your continued support. Please keep sharing these episodes far and wide. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.